So we talked a little bit when we got started about that smartphone experience, about the fact that real estate technology hasn't gotten to that point yet, where we're used to having an iPhone, an Android, where the apps update, you connect to all of your systems immediately, and all these tools talk to each other. And we've had, the history of the real estate industry is sort of silos. Hundreds and hundreds of MLSs, thousands and thousands of brokerages, building their own technology. And all that's worked in individual locations, and we've always said real estate is local, which is what makes it interesting and important and valuable. Technology is global. So data standards have really come to the forefront in the industry in terms of making sure that our technology tools work together. And the folks that we have here today have been working through different tools to bring that smartphone experience to the industry, to the kind of tools you use at the MLS, the brokerage level, and even consumer-facing tools. So I wanted to start with you, Katie. W&R Studios made the decision to push forward with data standards, with your tools, and saying we're going to move to a modern API. And I promise we're not going to say API a lot. We're not going to get too deep. You might. Are you on?
Hello. Yes. Okay.
But
I might say API a lot.
It's okay. It's okay if you do. But really, this is just data sharing standards. This is the way our data can get in between all the tools we use, so that those tools work together well. So what was the decision like for your company, and why was it important for you to move forward with that?
Well, so the conversation, I mean, particularly, we'd hear it at conferences about, MLS executives talking about moving to the web API, and we're gonna charge forward and do this, and it kind of sounded to us like the vendors were not doing their part to make that change and to kind of get to this modern front. So we decided at the RESO Fall Conference in Milwaukee that we were going to start making this transition and find somebody that we could work with, that we could test their API and have this conversation. So we actually, with CoreLogic, we decided to use Trestle. They had the Austin database set up that we could access. We had our lead developer set up a Slack channel with their development team, and it was a great way for us to work together because we had this open conversation. It was easy to just have these, send a question over to Al at CoreLogic, and then he may be working on something else, and then he could get back to John when he had time, and then we were able to work way more efficiently and get things up and running. So once we did that, then we started moving on to other MLS vendors, so working more with the Spark API, with Bridge Interactive. So yeah, just trying getting our products up to the standards that they would be able to digest that information via the web API.
And this is, again, just the modern way to share data. We've got traditional systems that we built out as an industry to get data from an MLS to a brokerage, or a brokerage's vendor originally. But when we bring in new technology vendors and new technology staff at the brokerage or MLS level, they have to reinvent the wheel. They have to relearn how to work with data in the industry, because we've done things differently than the entire rest of the world, which makes it expensive to hire technology workers, to get technology products built, and frankly keeps innovators out of the industry because we don't use modern data standards in a lot of the tools that we use. So for your company, what did that look like? Did you get greater efficiencies, or what did the progress look like as you were rolling that out?
Yeah, so I mean, I wouldn't say it was like an automatic, oh, this is great, it's super efficient, and it's still work, and we're still encountering hiccups here and there, but for the most part, the great thing about the web API is that at this point, they're all data dictionary feeds, so that makes it an easier setup process for us. So it makes that whole thing more efficient because it's an easier way for us to digest that information. Whereas if we're looking at a RETS feed, we may not be getting data dictionary standards, so we have to manually go in and map all those fields. Where we have built a proprietary system that can recognize data dictionary feed, automatically map those feeds, so it's basically 100% more efficient than using a RETS feed that's not data dictionary.
But it took time and money to get there. It was an investment.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So, and when we talk about these data standards, this is not just a real estate industry thing. This is that smartphone experience is because the World Wide Web is built on data standards. That's why your Facebook and your Amazon and Google and everything you use work together. And Frank Major with BrightMLS has worked in the mortgage industry as well. And lots of industries have these data standards, standards that allow competitors to come together, raise everyone's foundation, float all boats that rising tide, and still be competitors on top of that, providing more value to consumers. So Frank, you can talk a little bit about the tools you developed based on the mortgage industry standards.
Sure. So I'm new to the MLS industry, so I'm now a 7-month veteran, so I know it all. I figured it all out. My real background is in fintech and worked for a financial institution, and like a lot of financial institutions, they had a mortgage origination system. And like a lot of individuals, you sell your loans to the GSEs, your Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, you'll sell your loans to them. At that time, we had to build this particular effort. We had to build interfaces to both providers because we wanted to be able to sell loans to Fannie and Freddie. But luckily, Fannie and Freddie had agreed to follow the MISMO standard. And like all standards, there's pros and cons to it. But one of the pros to it is you can integrate with them with less mapping exercise. So we could build a common interface for both partners, map once, deliver twice, thereby reducing time and effort. And I'm a big proponent of standards. I think it allows you to speak a common language from communities that don't always have to work together. I can have two entities, don't know much about each other, but they can agree on that common language, they'll speak between each other, and therefore I can get some efficiencies. And in fintech, and I think I'll see the same thing when I come here, is that allows smaller players to enter the marketplace, to try things out that are innovative, to push the boundaries in ways that you can't if there is no common way. Besides fintech, I did a little work with e-commerce, and we did business with Amazon. They're a de facto standard. They're so big, if you want to do business with them, they will tell you exactly how to do it. But if I want to go work with eBay, I want to go work with Jet or Alibaba, I've got to do different interfaces. And Amazon's not going to play and make a standard that I can communicate with e-commerce platforms. They're the elephant in the room. You want to play business with them, you go with them. But I think if groups come together and create these standards, it's a great motivator for industry to come out and provide new features. It's going to fall generally in one of three ways. You're going to all come together, create a standard. You're going to have a huge entity that kind of says, you want to do business? This is the de facto standard. Or it's going to be the Wild West, and the Wild West is not where you want to be. I think you guys, as I come to the industry, I see RESO, I see some standards. As long as they're moving forward in a progressive, aggressive way, really benefits. And I've seen it in the fintech, and I think I'll see it here as well.
And you're the real deal, a technology person who actually does this work, not just one of these talking heads who tells you all about it at conferences. But can you talk about the efficiencies that you saw in terms of that development of the standards?
Sure. The MISMO standard, I think they're on version 3 or version 3.x. But back when I did it, I'm an old man, it was back version 2.x. We saw about I want to say 30–40% efficiency on the development time. It'd be perfect, you'd say 100% efficiency, you develop it once and deliver twice, it should be 100. But realistically, everyone has a slight flavor of a standard, so it's not a perfect overlap. You may say, oh, we both follow the standard, you go to implement, you go, well, that's not right, and then you have that debate and you fix and you clean it up. But even then, we do see some 30–40% efficiency on the delivery, and then the maintenance cost, that long tail afterwards, where you build once, maintain for the rest of it, that would reduce as well. So, you know, in a perfect world, we all adhere to those standards exactly, and we'd see even a greater efficiency. But even 34%, it was a $100 million effort over 5 years. So 30–40%, not across the whole $100 million, but a piece of it is a significant gain. And then the maintenance costs, you know, the system's been in production for 7 or 8 years, so the ongoing maintenance cost is really nice to see as well.
Yeah. Bill, you're with the brokerage company with Compass, and so I know you're highly focused on getting good access to good data. We'll talk about that in a second because you and I talk about that a lot. But in terms of just the standardization of the kind of data that a brokerage company is looking for as they work with different MLSs, what do we need to do as an industry to find ways to make it easier and quicker for there to just be defined, understood data standards for technology companies that either they're vendors or they're technology brokers?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think when I started in this industry, 2000 or so, as you said a minute ago, innovators were from the outside coming in, and now innovators are us. We're all innovators. There's a lot more national, positions for real estate brokerages than there used to be. And so now we're all playing in the same field, and we're using data sets and policies especially that were written back when IDX meant I want a website for my individual agents. So I think the one thing we can all do collectively is ask a lot of whys Like, why do we do what we do? Why do we have a standard based on this particular feed that's supposed to do this particular thing? You know, and someone like Frank comes in and asks a whole lot of whys, which is great. Institutionally is wonderful to do that. Just a big hard reset on exactly why we do what we do and who our customer is, and, you know, just begin to question those things at every level.
So now we'll get into the meat of your current really interesting issue for brokers, which is you're a participant in an MLS and you want to have access to data, you want to build good tools. But that's inconsistent, obviously, across the marketplace. So your concern, and you talked in particular about the difference between an agent who can get into an MLS and see all kinds of different data, but then the broker may not actually be able to access that when they ask the MLS for that data. What does that sort of dichotomy look like?
Yeah, when you dissect this, and, you know, I spend way too much time on things like this. I have a lot to do.
Why we're here today.
Yeah, exactly. When you dissect, the why, you know, again, when I started in this, we were building IDX feeds. I came from an MLS vendor side, so I was building technology, a boutique software company, and we were building IDX feeds specifically for vendors who would then go out and build websites. And now brokers are consuming those IDX feeds themselves. It used to not be that way. It used to be brokers didn't build websites. Brokers hired someone to do that. But we're still using the policy designed to protect that broker's data from that broker. So again, it's the question of why are we doing that? And so my current, like, you know, the thought bubble that I walk around with is, if I'm an agent with Compass and I can log into any MLS and I can see 99.9% of all the data, yet if I want that data delivered to me as a broker, I only have 1, 2, maybe 3 options. And I totally understand why those protections are in place. I just think we need to now, 2019, ask, why do we have those protections? What are we protecting ourselves from exactly?
So, in speaking of being in 2019, I'm sure we must have some MLS folks in the room. Do you have data access policies that allow your brokers to get access digitally, a process that they can get online and go through that? I know we'd have some nodding heads over here. So we've been to a lot of, and over here as well, a lot of conferences we've been to lately where folks are working on that to the point where we had some traditional processes for data access, but more and more technology companies and brokerages need more and more uses of data. And that's obviously a big thing, is streamlining that, making sure the rules are enforced to protect that marketplace, which is the MLS's role, but also being able to take out the unneeded, unnecessary steps to get there that are just part of a traditional process. And what's your process been and experience with getting access in different markets, Katie?
It's a challenge. And I mean, similar struggles that you encounter. I think it's a little bit different, obviously, as a vendor when we're asking for the data. Obviously, there are concerns of like, well, why do you need this data? Are you going to sell this data? You know, how's it going to be used? Which is fine, and I don't mind answering those questions because we have good practices. We consider ourselves like stewards of the data. We understand that that is, you know, sacred data in a sense. So all of our tools are built for agents, and that's who we're providing that data back to. But it's still it's always a struggle going into new markets and trying to explain what our products do, and trying to, not always. I mean, there are some MLSs that, you know, can work with us, and once we kind of give a demo or whatever it takes, it's easier to get that data license agreement. But I think the problem is kind of what Bill is saying. It's almost like there's this cookie cutter approach to the licensing. So it's like, if you don't fit in this box, then we're not going to give you any data. And that's the problem that I think we need to resolve as an industry, having like a more open discussion and a better approach to that.
Yeah, and as partners too, by the way, it's really easy for us to go back into our corners and be suspicious of one another, or be frustrated and say things on stage or in meetings that you have to then go back and apologize for. I mean, you know, it's easy to get frustrated, but it's not what we're serving, and I think we're all serving the same people. There is an urgency in real estate now that I am detecting that I have never detected before. And the urgency, like as Compass is laser focused on the agent, you've heard that, you know, many times. That's who we are. The agent in the markets that we serve, the top 50 markets or so in the country, are incredibly hyper uber competitive. And so any edge you can come up with is absolutely critical. So it doesn't take you long before you back your way into, well, I need more information because my customer has more information than I do typically, or think they do. So now, if we can't even get, what I would consider a given piece of data out of the MLS to then serve my agents, that's where we just kind of throw up our hands and have to talk about it again,
And that's a key point. I mean, if we actually talk to most professionals, they would admit at a certain point their consumers believe, or maybe their consumers have, better technology in some cases than they have. And maybe that's because a company with billions of dollars has band-aided all of our systems together to make it work for them. And it's not a negative for anyone in the industry. It's where we are, but we have to be able to admit that and say what's next. So Frank, we'll put you on the spot as the new guy. Coming into this industry, what's your impression of the ability for technology companies to get access to data in the MLS marketplace? And is there anything that you're doing at Bright to organizationally work on that?
Yeah, I think the technology is there. I think we can all agree there's ways we can share data in a better way, and it's not like the technology can't support it. I think the policies and procedures are probably areas we have to focus on, and I'm not going to claim to be an expert after 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 months in the policies and procedures, but I have no doubt the technology can get the data out there and get it out in a way that protects the right people. I mean, as someone mentioned, we are stewards of the data. The data does not belong to the MLS, and we need to do that stewardship in a way that is not misused, and that can be undervalued. And so we need to make sure that we get the data out to the right people at the right time so they can make the right business decision. And to me, it's not just the data. MLS have a lot of data. It's the insights you can get from the data. So me pumping out a ton of data can overwhelm the end user. What we want to do is get the insights in front of the broker, in front of the agent, so they can truly be the SME. And me dropping 4,000 attributes in their face and saying, good luck, I'm going to go sit here on the beach now, probably isn't really helping them. So how do I get them the insight so they can be that expert and really show that value to the marketplace? I think the technology we need to push not only through the APIs, integration points that we're looking at is also how do we then use those integration points to protect the data as it gets further and further away from the source. Because that's your concern, at least my concern when I look at MLS is, when I control where the data goes, it's much more comfortable. As it gets further away from me and I can't see it, it gets less comfortable, but technology can help with that. And so I think it's not only the APIs, it's how we do the attribution as the data gets further away from the source. So there is a comfort level so we can open the door more, or the kimono if we want to be more risque, and let people actually enjoy the data where it needs to be. And that's where as I get more understanding of the industry, what I'm going to look at is, I can go build 50 APIs, and that's great. But if the data doesn't get far enough out to the people that need it, it doesn't really matter. I don't know if I'm a big fan. If I build it, they won't come. Because it costs money to build this stuff, and if nobody comes, I look really bad. So that's where I want to be, is get the right APIs, get the information out, and let it get further away from source, and with the guarantee that it's used properly. And I then don't go out and have to check everywhere, because that's a big pain in the butt, too. But I think innovation, technology can solve all the cool problems, and if we use it properly here, I don't think there's a reason we can't speed everything else up.
And for those aware, I mean, that's something that the industry is working on, the CMLS and RESO initiative for data access marketing, just to bring clarity to technology companies that this is how you get access to data. There are rules, there are systems that multiple listing services need to have to protect and, again, be stewards of that data for their brokers, but also to provide clarity to a technology company that as you expand into new markets, you know what that process looks like. And I think that's been something, we've talked about a lot. You touched on some of those, data access issues, and Bill, you as well, in terms of what governance looks like if I'm not going to sell it, if I'm not going to publicly display it. Can we have those sort of rules that are very clear and straightforward to a broker or a technology company so they understand that as they go into a marketplace? That's something you've worked with in the past quite a bit.
Yeah. Yes, I think that one of the things that we are paying more attention to, again, is going back to the broker is now an innovator. I mean, we're, talking about ourselves as a technology company. Compass is a technology company that happens to be a brokerage, depending on how you say it. We're also brokers that happens to be a technology company. It's whatever you want to say. In Katie's situation as a vendor, she's earned a reputation. I mean, she has a nationwide footprint. She should be able to walk into the door of a new MLS and get a certain level of service just by the fact that she's done well as a steward with data otherwise. As a member of the MLS, I have a sense that I should be able to walk in the door and get a level of service, again, that isn't outright suspicion from the get-go. So I think we do have some work to do there, but again, going back to the corner analogy, we're all partners. We're all serving the same people. And the changes aren't that necessary, aren't that drastic to make, but it is like way past time to have these conversations.
Can you give them all a big hand for being here with us? Thank